like seasons, right? Yeah. And with the, I'm part of the Sakyadhita Australia, Buddhist women in Australia, and we've decided here to have, we have meetups, and we're having a picnic coming up at the end of the month and in Kings Park, and we decided we'll just have one with each change of Noongar season. And that way we just keep at some level, keep it in our mind, you know, the changes of season, and, you know, 6 seasons rather than 4. I heard many years ago, I don't know if it's true, that the seasons change in Australia on the 1st of the month rather than at the equinox. I was going to say eclipse, and it's like not eclipse, equinox, because it was when they changed from winter to summer and vice versa, uniforms in the Defence Forces. Okay. I don't know if that's true, but it's sort of like, aren't we a little bit out of sync with the actual season? Anyway, due to climate change, it's all changing anyway, and due to constant change, it's all changing anyway. So also that we can't add time to life, that we're getting closer to death every minute, every moment, actually, every breath. So, of course, we say long life prayers. We say long life prayers for our teachers and so forth. And we, of course, you know, we have things like our diet and so forth. We don't want to shorten the life. I mean, we want to live as long and healthy a life as we can, and the healthier our diet. We do have a certain throwing karma, as I said, but, you know, within that, there are also circumstances that can shorten our life. So, of course, we want to make it all as good as possible. And I think I mentioned last time, I can't remember if I mentioned last time, that Chenrezig Institute, when she was the one who most recently passed away at Chenrezig Institute, and because she'd been living with cancer for so long, she was very particular about her diet until she was told, well, you've only got a few months to live. And at that point, focus on the mind, not on the diet, right? Because she wasn't going to be sustaining the physical body for so much longer. So it's just like, right, that's not my priority right now. Yeah, so thinking that, you know, from this moment on, actually from the time of conception in the Buddhist teachings, we're aging. You know, from the moment of conception, we're aging. Now, don't say that to a little baby who comes out and say, oh, you old thing already. Well, sometimes people do, so it looks like an old soul. Yeah, I've been around this samsara for a while before. But anyway, so getting that idea that we're already in the aging process from, you know, from even pre-birth is, you know, mind-boggling. But getting that sense of each breath closer to death, each breath closer to death. You know, from each moment we're racing to our death. I don't know about racing, because I remember with on retreat with Lama Zopa Rinpoche at Lamp of the Path in North Carolina, we did a walking retreat. And it was great when we're going up, you know, a walking meditation with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you know. And we're going up the hill and we're bringing all beings up towards higher realms, bringing them towards liberation, bringing them towards enlightenment. We're going up the hill. And then when we were going down the hill, Rinpoche said, now when you're going down, each step, one step closer to death. And it was like, I don't want to do this part of the meditation. Except that down was leading to the Gompa. And just like, well, I want to be in the Gompa, but I don't want to. Very interesting what the mind does. I don't want to do that. But to think about it, to think, you know, when that time comes, one breath closer to death, and one time there'll be a breath out and the next one just won't come in, you know, then we're dead. Think about that. And if we think about if you've been around people in that death process, it really is. You just wonder if the next breath is coming, the next breath is coming, the next breath, is it going to come? Is it going to come? And it's good to wait, because I know with my mother, you know, my one of my brothers and I were both there, actually, when my father died, when my mother died. And at one point my brother said, you know, I think this is it. I said, just wait a minute. And there was just one more breath. And then one more breath out, not one more breath in. So it's what happens to all of us, right? So with each breath, we're getting closer to death. Don't stop breathing. Maybe if I store up the breath. No, it doesn't work that way. Or even when we're asleep, when we're distracted, we're still getting closer to death. And think about the number of people who, you know, die in their sleep, even from unexplained causes. And of course, people think, I just want to die in my sleep. I don't want to know a thing about it. And the idea that it's all going to be peaceful and calm, sorry, maybe not, you know. Again, when my mother was, you know, in the last year of her life, and you know, I'd often, because I was traveling up and down to Sydney, but I was also her carer, and I thought, what if I come back? And I used to sneak into her room and see if she's still breathing. And then, what if I come back and she has died? Well, you know, you do what you need to do. But sometimes she'd say, I had to get up and open the window because the air was stuffy. The air wasn't stuffy, but she had oxygen, you know, sort of oxygen prongs for a long time. So it was just like, you know, that sense of, I can't breathe. But yeah. So yeah. Okay. So, and then the third point, while we're still alive, you know, you think about the free time that we have to practice Dharma, because we hear, you know, the best thing is to meditate, to practice, and we're not necessarily going to go off into the cave like Milarepa or even the Hilton cave, but maybe if you can, go. You know, if we think about how much time, say you live for 70, 80, I think it's about mid-80s at the moment, the average human lifespan. How much of that time do we spend sleeping? How much time do we spend eating? How much time do we spend shopping? How much time do we spend working? How much time, you know, watching television or going to movies or sports or whatever? So we reflect how much time I actually spent on Dharma. Of course, we can do all of those activities with a Dharma motivation, you know, even before we go to sleep. And even think, you know, even if I die in my sleep, may that be for the benefit of all beings. But I do want to wake up in the same body. It's such relief. And, you know, when we're younger, we put it off till we're older. We don't necessarily see the urgency and then get caught up in the busyness of life and family and this and that. And then you get older. This is how it's presented. And then you go, oh, I wish I'd done it while I was younger. I'm not feeling so great now. I'm too tired. I'm too, you know, don't have energy to practice. So we don't want to get to the point where we sort of feel regret for not having done what we could do. So in other words, the whole point, knowing, yes, I know I'm going to die, so got to practice Dharma because that's what's going to help me. It's what's going to help me in this life. It's going to help me at time of death because it's going to help me after the time of death, right? So, and then the second point, or the fourth point, so we've got 3 points under each point, that the time of death is uncertain. As the Buddha said, it's unsure whether tomorrow or the next life will come first. So you know, appreciating. I have all the conditions right now. I have all the conditions to practice Dharma. I have the interest in that. I have the motivation to be here. And just, you know, we think about how many beings, how many human beings there are in the world. We've just reached 8 billion, apparently. Probably 8 billion and something, I think they said 200,000 more being born every what? I don't know. But since 8 billion, there's a few more. But how many of those have even any sort of spiritual path whatsoever? And how many of those actually practice their spiritual path? How many of those are Buddhists and have these teachings? And then out of those, how many actually practice? So it gets more and more refined, so that we become, you know, a very small percentage of that population, which makes you sort of feel more responsible for everybody else. As Milarepa did, meditate on the uncertainty of the time of death. So we look at the fact that the lifespan in this world is uncertain. It's not predicted. It says in this world. I mean, it's interesting because there are other world systems where there are other human beings, right? And so, anyway, we stick to the world we know, the world as we know it. Just trying to get this to behave. Okay. Oh. Yeah. So, if we reflect on the number of children that die before their parents, so age is no guarantee. It's not like at a certain age, although you get to a certain age, and as my mother said, you get to a certain age and you really just say, well, she used to say, if I wake up in the morning and I'm in a foul mood, don't take it personally. It's just because I'm not dead yet. But she was 93 at the time. And her body was, as you know, I went and thanked her doctor and all the people at the doctor's surgery after she did pass away. And I would just remember the doctor saying she was a very sick person. She was very sick. And then she'd say, the only thing that she wanted me to do for her, I couldn't, which was, you know, euthanasia. Yeah. My mother was not Buddhist, so she didn't have the sense of, well, we do have euthanasia. I don't know if we have it in this state now. We do. And, you know, from a karma point of view, it's sort of like playing God, even though we don't say God. That we don't know people's karma, that even that we could be suffering, and people could be suffering at the end of life, and they think, oh, that's cruel for them to stay alive. From a Buddhist perspective, we'd say, well, we don't know what karma they're purifying in this very human rebirth, that if they were reborn in, say, a hell realm, it'd be much intense suffering. So better to purify at this time, in this life. And we just don't know that. So that's the Buddhist understanding. Yeah. So, you know, we can look at that. We can look at news headlines and we can see where so many young people die. And we talk about young or strong, being strong. I remember one time in the news where I think it was in Melbourne, he must have been 17, 18 on a building site, and the whole wall crashed down and he was dead. So you sort of go to work and don't come home, and you're young and you don't, well, at any age you don't expect that. But, you know, we can look at all of these. Being healthy is no guarantee. You know, healthy people die before sick people all the time, don't they? So we see that. And even people being sick, you know, I think there's a tendency not to give people you've only got so much time to live, or how long or whatever, because you might live down to those expectations. Whereas, or sometimes when people, you know, there's a, well, 20 years ago, I was given this life expectancy, and they outlived that, because we would say, well, because it wasn't their time to die karmically, they didn't have the karma to die so early. I mean, sometimes medically it can't be explained. Yeah. Our future plans are no guarantee. We can die before we complete our work or our plans and so forth. So we make all these plans, and of course, don't stop making plans for your life. But I remember making a 5-year plan and none of it worked out. So I stopped making 5-year plans. They said, make a 5-year plan. Okay, I've made a 5-year, and none of it happened. So, okay, don't worry about the plan, ditch the plan, but still keep, still keep planning. I thought about that before you complete your work, although I was thinking about Margaret Olley, Australian artist, when she died. So she, the night before, everyone thought that she was going to die in a great fire because she was a chain smoker. And they thought, and she just had everything around her in her house, all the paint, it was just a lot of stuff. And they thought, oh, she's going to fall asleep smoking a cigarette and it's all going to go up in smoke. Well, that didn't happen. She finished a triptych. So I think it was Sydney Harbour. So she'd done 3. She just finished it. And the next morning, the cleaner found her at 7 a.m. dead. She had Tara, that is Tara statue. She used to say, Tara speaks to me, you know. What does she say? She never told me what she said. I was so upset. Just tell me what she said to you. Yeah. Anyway, she was a great benefactor of the arts and a mentor of young artists and so forth. And let's hope that when she passed, it was, I mean, you don't know when somebody dies and they say, oh, they died peacefully. Well, unless you're inside their mind, you don't know how peaceful that was.
Some people say, oh, that's fine.
Yes, some people know. They do know they're going to die. Yeah. 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 It's true. It's true. Okay. And then also about the uncertainty of the time of death, that there are many things that can kill us. There are more things that can kill us than sustain our life. I remember in Sydney some years ago, the whatever it is, Sydney Rail commissioned this rapper to write a song about the dangers for young people. They were sort of hanging out windows or climbing onto the roof or whatever, and you know, you could lose your life. And so they commissioned this rapper to write this song to raise that awareness. And he wrote a song called Weird Ways to Die. And it was all these different weird ways to die. And it became really, really popular. Huh? The tune was, you remember the tune? Yeah, it was all very weird ways to die. And then somewhere in there was a message of be safe on the train and not stick your limbs out. It was in there somewhere. Weird ways to die, the fridge dropping from the sky. Yeah, great. So there can be a lot of external conditions like that, or accidents. Just think of the natural catastrophes of, well, look at now, you know, I keep hearing somebody else died in the floodwaters, somebody else died in the floodwaters and so forth. Again, when, you know, when the floods were, I think, 2014, 2015, when I was in Maitland and looking after my mum. And like one poor woman had gone to the, like she shouldn't have been driving. She was in her 70s. She went to pick up a bottle of milk or a carton of milk and got stuck in the floodwaters in her car and died, right? I guess didn't have the forethought of that. And that, you know, many, many instances you can think like that. And then we have all the internal conditions, like all the different illnesses that we have. And as we're living in this time that's called a great degeneration, and more illnesses coming along. I mean, who heard of COVID 3 years ago, you know? Let alone more and more physical illnesses, mental illnesses, and so forth, so that there's many conditions of illness. And I have to say, at my age, the number of people I know who've either died of cancer or who are palliative or, you know, in that stage. You know, cancer's been a big, you know, throughout the 20th century now, you know, sort of people. I mean, the good thing is, of course, there are, for a lot of, there are, you know, if you can get a cancer early, there's a lot of very good treatment. So we have, people have the karma to experience that as well. Yes, yeah, it is. So as the medicine Buddhas predicted, you know, that at the time of great degeneration, they would be here in the world. And we've got to have that Buddha wall, medicine Buddha wall there, the Tara wall there, medicine Buddhas are coming. We haven't even started on the medicine Buddhas. Quick, we need them. Yes, so it's said to be degeneration of lifespan, which we find very difficult to comprehend. But if we say there's going to be more physical, mental illness, then you can think, oh, lifespan would go down, not to mention the environmental degradation. I mean, I just think, you know, as, I don't know how they do it at places like Marble Bar and whatever, when it gets to 50 degrees, like how much heat can our bodies tolerate? Our human bodies tolerate. So we're going to have to transform in some way. It was interesting in that statistics that they gave about, you know, 8 billion alive today. And it's going to be, you know, like I think it said in the 1800s it was 1 billion, and then massive growth. And then it's going to peak around 2050, 9.6 billion, and then go down. And it's not going to go back up again. So you start to think, oh, well, maybe we are going out of existence, you know. We're not there yet. We're still going on the up. But yes, if we look at the environment, so the environment, increasing war, at the time of COVID, His Holiness and Lama Zopa Rinpoche then predicted, and the WHO, famine on top of that. And then when we finally get to the end of the world, like the environmental destruction, fire and wind, you know, and we'll have an end of this world system. Now, that's not necessarily happening tomorrow, but it could be within a couple of centuries. So that has been predicted as a possibility. So we are, if we look at the conflict one, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, conflict at every level, from our interpersonal relationships, or you could even say your relationship with yourself, you know, how conflicted are we within ourselves, and then within all our relationships, all the way up to these wars, you know. So it's very, very, and we can see that, you know, the amount of, I don't know, it seems to be the amount of uncontained anger. You just got to look at social media. I very rarely do. You know, things like that, that it's sort of like there's more and more anger, it seems. Now, please contradict me.
So we're going to give that
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after that, it's going to be a decline in human rebirth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that could suggest either
more rebirths in other realms,
or enlightenment.
Hopefully enlightened beings. Well, that's what His Holiness said. He said, you know, this world's coming to an end. The best thing is to do to, you know, aim for the Pure Land. And then you'll see the destruction of this universe, but you won't be in that destruction. Or not universe, this planet, you know. I mean, that's why this urgency, environmental urgency, is why I think, you know, His Holiness wrote Our Only Home, and many other religious leaders talking about, you know, come on, we've got to have environmental responsibility because, yeah, the current situation is not sustainable for our life. Yeah. So we see those sort of indicators where food's becoming less affordable for people, particularly fruit and vegetable, the sort of crops that we need to sustain us. Yeah. So that brings us to those things that normally sustain us, like food, medicine and so forth, can be conditions for death. You know, people, you know, right now, even with the, you know, having accessible, you know, we're very fortunate in Australia. We've got every food in the world available to us. How many varieties do we need? And yet people can react to like peanuts or fish, or, you know, there's many things that can be a cause of death. And well, I don't know if do people die of food poisoning? I suppose you can. Yes. Yeah, untreated food poisoning. So, and medicine might work for one person, but not work for the next, you know, for the same condition. And even our, you know, shelter of our houses, you can have fires, you can be carried away in floods. You know, it's, I remember in India many years ago when they had, was it a cyclone, a landslide or something? And a lot of people lost their homes. And when they tried to get insurance or whatever, what happened was the government wanted to downplay internationally the number of people who'd lost homes and so forth. So it was really hard for them to be recompensed for that, because it's like, oh no, your village wasn't affected. Well, actually, you want to come and have a look. So we can say corruption can play into that, I guess. So we just think that the things that we expect are going to sustain us aren't necessarily always going to do that, or not for everybody, you know. I mean, we still have starvation in the world. Even though there's enough food to feed everybody in the world, it's not evenly distributed. It's many conditions. And then we look at the fact that the fragility of the body itself, you know, that, I mean, I was speaking to someone here yesterday who was saying, you know, they say prayers to their lungs. Thank you for sustaining me. Could you just do it for a bit longer, please? Why not? Because I always think about that with, you know, the feet, for example, you know, that the feet are doing, you know, they're holding up the whole body a lot of the time. And just like, we have a certain amount of durability and good design of the body. However, it's not going to last forever. You know, the body is not going to last forever. And also just even the fragility of our skin, I think, you know, just you can get a nick and it can get infected, and, you know, just because of, and then as you age, the skin gets thinner and thinner. But, you know, it's like, it's so easy just to, from something that seems a very minor thing, for that to become a very major cause of illness and death. So these are all to help us reflect that, yes, I could die at any time. And to stop getting too caught up in these worldly concerns, and to practice Dharma, to practice right now. So So that's the second of the 3 points, that time of death is uncertain, and all the contributing factors to that uncertainty, why it is so uncertain, right? And in a way, with Milarepa reflecting that, it's often said that's the one that's most important to meditate on. If you're just going to meditate on one of those points, then that's the most powerful one to meditate on, the uncertainty of the time of death. I remember with the prison project in America, in the last 12 years or so, we've had 2 people who died by being executed. Unfortunately, they still have it in some states in America. And one of them, when he was in the last 21 days of his life because they removed them from death row into isolation for that period. And he said, I might die before my death time. So that was, I mean, he knew that it was coming anyway, so it wasn't like he's got years and years, but it could have been. They were still doing all the appeals and so forth that go forward. But that in his mind, it was like, well, there's no certainty that that's my death date, even now, even then. It was very good for his mind. He also had Bodhisattva's way of life, Vajrasattva, so he had his practices that he was focusing on in that period. So wonderful. I mean, I think when people do get that, you know, maybe they get a prognosis of you've only got so long to live, like a friend of mine recently, because, you know, his wife asked how long, and so I said, well, a few months. Suddenly you prioritize everything in your life for certain. And this is saying, why not do that prioritization now with that call?
I've heard that it's beneficial to do that practice where you actually imagine your death.
Yes.
Sort of regularly. Do you think that?
Yes, yeah, like we did a brief meditation of that last time, and to actually, think of, you know, imagine that you're on your deathbed, and imagine that it's in the best possible conditions, whether you're in a hospital, whether you're at home, family around you, or people you want around you, everything as conducive as possible. And nonetheless, you're at the end of your life. And to reflect what thoughts come up, so that the thoughts that come up, whether it's thoughts of fear or regret or, you know, I wish I had done, nobody says, I wish I'd taken that job, you know. They never say that on their deathbed. Just telling you. But just recognize, because those sort of thoughts that arise are the things that are really important to hold on to in while we're alive. And while we're alive and well and so forth, we can engage with that more and see, oh no, it's like, you know, how post-COVID people started to making different a lot of people made different choices about where they wanted to live or how they wanted to live or so forth. Not everybody, but a lot of people did sort of use it as a sense of, a big wake-up call about impermanence. And so, yeah, how do I want to live my life? So I think by doing that meditation regularly, we can reflect on that and keep that sense alive. Yeah. Because just thinking about doing this pilgrimage next year, I think many years ago I was like, oh yeah, pilgrimage would be nice, but not really necessary for life. But one of my friends, a nun who died many years ago now, but towards the end of her life, Lama Zopa Rinpoche told her to do as many pilgrimages as possible. So even when she was getting weaker and weaker, she still did pilgrimage. So it was really interesting, wasn't it? To go to holy places, and you get the benefit of, Rinpoche calls them power places, you know, of the power of those places where great meditators, where the Buddhas meditated, where great other beings have meditated and so forth. So yeah, they're consecrated places. And if you did happen to die there, well, that would be good too. Like when Tibetans, you know, sort of come to teachings for His Holiness. I remember being at teachings in Amravati where it was 40+ degrees and the Tibetans had arrived with all their, well, not only all their pots and pans and set up, you know, a whole Tibetan village, but also a lot of clothes, and it was 40+ heat. And they were ending up fainting and ending up in hospital. This is particularly elderly people. And His Holiness, because they just tell His Holiness to make all the announcements that, because everyone will obey His Holiness. Could you just make all the announcements of what we want people to do? And so he just said, and you Tibetans, take off all those clothes, give them a good wash and don't put them back on, you know. He wasn't saying walk around naked, but he was saying you're overdressed for the heat, you know. We don't want to see you dead. But some of them were like very elderly and saying, if I die in the presence of His Holiness, that's the best thing. So that was their belief. Like that. I don't think anyone died, by the way. But they did get faint a lot. Okay, so the final contemplation is that only the Dharma is going to help us at the time of death. So at the time of life, yes, only the Dharma's going to help. So we have this quote, or our spiritual practice. So when rituals no longer work, this is from the Panchen Lama, when rituals no longer work, when friends have given up hope for my life, when anything I do is futile, may I be blessed to remember my Guru's instruction. So it doesn't mean that you'll remember absolutely everything of the whole of the Dharma teachings, but wouldn't it be wonderful to be so familiar, say, with the image of the Buddha or of your Guru or whatever, to be able to call them to mind and say, you know, say the refuge prayer. I mean, you might not even be compass, let alone say the refuge prayer. And even you are compass, is it going to come to mind? One of the students in New Zealand, so she still is director of hospice in New Zealand, and she had, some years ago, she had a serious accident at lunchtime where she basically drove into a wall, and nearly all the bones in her body were broken. I think one arm was okay, something like that. And one of her sons put up this blog of her treatment and how she was going. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, you know, because we're often do these prayers for so-and-so. So Rinpoche said, do these prayers. And if she lives, do these ones. So you can see, Rinpoche wasn't saying, don't worry, she's going to live. It was like, and if she lives, do those ones. Well, she did actually end up living, and now she's as fully recovered as she can be, you know, and to the point of being able to travel and continue to work and so forth. But there's that sort of touch and go-ness of it too. And this is where I was saying, we get busy doing practices for others. And it said, if you have a karmic connection with that person, it can be powerful. So who do we have the strongest karmic connection with? Our parents, particularly our mothers, you know. Doesn't get closer than that. Well, yes, your spiritual teacher. Yeah, exactly. But I'm saying in terms of doing practices for others, you know, thinking of, wow, you know, if I have that opportunity to do that for my family members. I think I'm in a situation where my family members have high expectations. Because, mind you, my family is Catholic, Muslim and Buddhist, so they get all the prayers. Even if you don't want, my dad said, I don't want anything religious. Sorry, Dad, you did. We're doing it all. Yeah. So, no, you know, that, but for us to remember the Guru's instruction, to at least, you know, the more we familiarize now with a particular practice, and if we have been given a particular practice, you know, to follow, those of you who've taken refuge, remember refuge. And the way that we remember that is having it in our mind stream now, you know, so it's there. At least has better opportunity to be there. But as I said, you may not be compass, you know. But just think, if somebody's in a coma, how many times people who've come out of comas have said they heard everything that was going on. So we can do prayers for someone in a coma who's there. And this is where I say, you know, if you have particular prayers and practices that you do, where it's, if, you know, minimum that you've taken refuge, you do have a Dharma buddy that you, or Dharma buddies, they might die before you, that when that time comes, that they can do your prayers with you when you can't, or record them, and so that they can go in your ears. You know, both of those methods are really, really good. So the contemplation is that, you know, no money, no amount of resources is going to help us at the time of death. So this is cutting against the worldly concerns that saying, well, yeah, they might help in this life, it helps you pay your bills, but it's not the important thing in life, because at death time, it's not going to help you, no matter how rich or poor or anything in between, you're still going to die. And to think that, you know, we come into this world naked, empty, nothing, we go out of the world in the same way. This is how we leave this life as well. And so whether you're a world leader or whether you're poor or however you are, we're all going to experience death the same way. Although we'd like to think as Buddhists we might experience it a bit differently, particularly if we practice now. The practices of the death process is something that we'll look at next time in another couple of weeks. But you know, that we have these practices, as I said, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, the most extensive writings about what to do at the time of death, what to prepare for death, and what to do afterwards. So we'd say, you know, the friends and family can't help us in terms of, they can't stop the death process happening. It's not that we might want to have friends and family around us and have that sense of familiarity, but not if they're grabbing hold of you saying, don't leave me, because then you feel like, oh, I've got to stay here. And then you get, your mind gets torn and so forth, that, you know, we die alone. No one else can experience our death. Even you die at the same time as other people, we're still experiencing our own death, isn't it? You know, we experience that by ourselves alone. And the body itself, you know, we spend a lot of time in our life looking after the body, caring for it. And to a certain extent, we need to do that to keep us healthy. Why? To practice the Dharma, to do our meditation. And so we need to stay healthy to benefit others and so forth. But at the time of death, the body's going to give you up. And that's our biggest attachment. So it's looking at, what are we attached to? What is it that right now, if I didn't have in my life, because this might come up, you say you do this meditation on, you know, I'm on my deathbed, just think of the attachments that you all have, the things that we're not ready to relinquish. It doesn't mean we don't want family and friends in our life, but to know that those relationships also are impermanent, you know, that sooner or later, even my parents, you know, married for 63 years. But, you know, when my father died, my mother didn't say, I'm coming with you. Her intention was to outlive my father because she thought he wouldn't cope, and that was pretty true. But of course, it's once he died, after a certain amount of time, she asked them, turn off the defibrillator, because she had the defib to kickstart her if my father was still alive. And then afterwards she said, no, turn it off. And then at some point, she also turned off the pacemaker. Oh, let the battery run down, because I said it's running down. We need to. No, I don't need another one. Thank you. When it's gone, I'm gone. Yeah, fair enough. You get to a certain age. I mean, it's natural death, really. So the body will, we have to think about our attachment to our body and reflect on that how easy is it going to be to let go of the body. And I also think on top of that, not just the body, but our mind. We'll look next time at the dissolutions of the body and mind. But I've seen people, it's very hard to let go of thinking. You can think how hard it is to do now, right? When we sit there to meditate and it's like, oh, just like a torrent of blah, 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 blah. And to, at least when we're practicing meditation, we're learning to let go of the attachment to the blah, 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 to say, sit on the bank of the stream of blah, blah, let it go by, let it go by. Don't jump in and be swamped by it, drown in it. So we've got all these techniques, and if we practice those now, that will really, really help at that time when all sorts of frightening things can arise to our mind. So then all of these points, so these whole of these 3 points with 3 subsets, is all to remind us, to practice Dharma. This is not to guilt trip ourselves and say, oh, I know I should practice, but to remind us that, life could end at any time. Just because my mind tells me I'm going to live forever and whatever, I'm making plans. I remember being rung up by a bank one time and trying to sell me in life insurance. And I said, no, thanks. I'm okay. I'm covered. I didn't say for future lives. I got future lives insurance, thanks. But think about it. Develop your future lives insurance. Yeah, don't ring her. She's weird. Okay. All right. So any questions, comments?
I suppose with continuity of mind, we can still, parents, those of us who parents have died, we can still do prayers and stuff.
Yes, yeah. So typically we do prayers for people who died in the 49 days, for 49 days. My Muslim sister-in-law said, oh, we do prayers. We compare notes. So she said, oh, we do for the 7 days. And I thought that was interesting because the biggest emphasis for us as well is those first 7 days, to do more continuous prayers in the first 7 days. And, like when my mother died, Geshe Samten, a teacher in Vajrayana Institute, gave me a whole, he sent me a text with, do this, do this, do this, do this, which was in the first 24 hours. It sort of took me the first 24 hours, but it was great because, what were you going to be doing? You weren't going to be just go to sleep, So it was wonderful to have that sense of I'm doing the best I can to help others. And I think that's really good. And so we can, and again, it's like, so we have this idea that we can, depending on our karma, our shared karma, have have an influence on that being in that bardo state, intermediate state, because a being in that intermediate state is not a physical clunky body like this. They take the form at some point of their future rebirth. And that's why we do 7, because it could be 7 times. They might go through a mini death and rebirth, up to 7 times before the next rebirth. But whatever period in that time, that because they're unobstructed by anything other than the womb of their future mother, let's say, if it's going to be a womb birth, then if our mind is towards them, their mind is towards us, if we have that strong karmic connection, so that we can have some influence there. And and even like at the death time itself, as they're going through, because we say, you know, leave the body as long as possible, because for an ordinary being going through the death process, after you've stopped breathing and brain activity stopped, the mind can still be active. You know, it's going through a dissolution, but it can still be active for 2 days, 3 days in an ordinary person. So that's why we emphasize that, you know, because my Muslim family say, no, you've got to get the person in the ground in 24 hours. So, you know, different belief systems that we say, because the consciousness is still there, to not disturb that. Yeah.
Can the consciousness travel before a person is put to rest and have a visitation with someone?
It can certainly travel, like in the, for example, like the near-death experience, where people can, it's almost like living another life, or, you know, they have an experience, like my mother had an experience of God, because she's Catholic. And so, yeah, you can have that traveling, or out-of-body experiences where people on an operating theatre have been able to report, like they even, like with cupboards high up, and they drew images on the cupboards that you would only know about if you were up there. And so they were able to report what they saw, and saw things on top of the cupboards that they hadn't been told were there. It's like that. So you can travel, but they came back into the body. Right.
They travel to a person, because my experience with my mother passed away.
Yeah.
I was terrible. I was bereaved when she passed, but I'd given permission to say, yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And may your journey be safe.
Yeah.
And then I felt like I was ungrounded, like I had no just air. And after a couple of days, I sat and meditated just quietly, and it was almost as if there was a visitation of someone putting a hand on my shoulder and saying goodbye, or yeah. That was relief. Right. And I know I had a job to do to get everything organised.
So she had passed already?
She had.
Yeah, yeah. I think you see this very much in also in Aboriginal beliefs, that that one, like you, that sort of visitation that you're saying, that they might not have been in the same, even in the same state or what locality. And I know a friend of mine said, well, I knew when she passed, because she came and, like I was in the car and she came and visited me. So people do have that experience, and I don't think we can necessarily dismiss that, because, you know, it's a very strong experience. Because because she's in the bardo state saying, I'm okay, you know, and that's where I say that, you know, that's where it is said that nothing obstructs them, so that they can go through mountains, they can go through buildings. It's the mind. This is what the mind does. The mind goes where the mind is. So her mind was connecting with you, obviously, because very close. And so, and just, yeah, I'm okay. Mind you, I did say to my mother after a few years of her saying about my father, you know, he visited me last night. I didn't want to say to her, I hope not, because I hope he's not stuck in some spirit realm attached to her and attached to the place. I didn't say to her, just ask him what he wants, or tell him to move on. I didn't say that because I thought she would be very distressed. It's like, I really hope it's just her attachment, not actually her. We don't really know, do we? Yeah. But yeah, it's a interesting field that even in medicine, they're saying we don't really know so much now, which is good, because you have this sort of, nope, they're dead, you know, and the minute that the brain stops and the breathing stops, and we've got so much evidence. In fact, is where the Dalai Lama is very much encouraging you know, for those great holy beings who can stay in the clear light of death for because they've practiced in their meditation for days, weeks, months, and so forth, that they film it as soon as possible where they can to be able to document that process happening. So there has been a couple of documentations of that to show the evidence. This is real. We're not just making it up. It's not just hearsay, that this does happen. And having been now twice with lamas who, like in Sydney, who were in that state, you know, it's clear. You know.
Is the idea that further purification is going on? Is the idea that further purification is going on in that clear light?
Yeah, we can say for in that clear light for an ordinary person outside of, such as ourselves, we're going to blink and well, we're not even going to blink, we're past blinking, but we're not going to necessarily be able to use that process, but it is the most subtle level of mind. So if for those beings who have control over that, they look forward to death because they can use that subtle mind to actually maybe complete tantric practices or complete, you know, or meditate more, realize emptiness, whatever, you know. So it's said. But, you know, we'll look at this next time when we look at the dissolutions, because that's always, yeah, anyway, we'll go into detail about how aware are we going to be at any of those stages realistically. I think it's, yeah. So we talk about the clear light of death, but as I say, we're not necessarily, unless we are, you know, great practitioners. I mean, don't give up on it, you know, go to the cave and get to that point and then reach the clear light and just like, great, now my time. Yeah. And they can determine how long to be in that state too. It's not like, oh, I got propelled out of it. So depending on what practices they want to do at that time. So apparently you decide beforehand. I say apparently, it's so out of my realm that I'm just like, yeah. Hey, shall we leave it there? Fascinating topic. We'll dedicate. Page 16, I think. Yes. Third verse down. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious body mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase more. Page 19. Long life prayers. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Page 22. You who uphold the subduous moral way, who serves as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Saviour of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings. O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme, O Lama, please, please live long. Okay, so I just wanted to make one announcement at least, that next Saturday,